confirmed cast a shadow over the mentor she had come to rely on. The story unfolded in a series of vivid flashbacks, each one carved sharply against the backdrop of the present. She saw a younger, grey, vibrant and idealistic, drawn into the Ivory cult's secret gatherings. The vaulted chamber where the cult convened was bathed in flickering torchlight, ivory masks gleaming eerily as silent figures chanted cryptic verses. Grey's expression was conflicted, his youthful face torn between fascination and unease. He had been seduced not by blind fanaticism, but by a desire to understand the power the cult wielded control over the narratives that shaped history itself. Yet, doubt gnawed at him from within. Not all was as it seemed. The texts they protected, the rewriting books, were as much a prison as a weapon. Back in the present, Ilara's voice trembled as she asked, "Why did you stay? Why not walk away?" Grey's piercing blue eyes met hers, revealing a flicker of vulnerability rarely seen. "Because," he said, "if I left, who would stand against them from within?" The revelation complicated everything. Grey was no mere mentor. He was a man caught in the shadows cast long ago, struggling to atone while trapped inside the cult's web. Later, as Ilara wandered the shifting labyrinth of bookshelves, the weight of history pressed down on her. The air buzzed softly with whispered secrets, the library alive with the restless murmurs of stories rewritten and futures rewritten anew. Doubt and determination warred within her chest. Could she trust Grey, whose past was intertwined with the very forces she sought to destroy? The question lingered, as elusive as the rewritten texts themselves. Yet, amid the uncertainty, a fragile hope stirred that knowledge, even when shadowed by betrayal, could still be a weapon to shape destiny. As the moon dipped lower, casting long shadows that danced like ghosts among the tomes, Ilara steeled herself. The battle for the narrative was far from over, and the lines between friend and foe blurred like ink bleeding through fragile parchment, but she would not falter. The story was hers to write, even if the final chapter remained unwritten. And somewhere deep within the library's heart, the ivory masks watched silently, their secrets waiting to be unearthed. The heavy silence of the library's restricted archives pressed in around her, punctuated only by the occasional flicker of candlelight that cast dancing shadows upon the ancient walls. Each word she deciphered from the final pages of the cipher felt like a cold hand tightening around her heart. The prophecy was clear. Her death was not a distant possibility, but an imminent certainty scripted with terrifying precision. She leaned back in the creaking wooden chair, her breath shallow, mind racing. The cipher's language was intricate, a labyrinth of symbols and coded warnings that finally converged on one chilling truth. The fatal crime predicted was her own murder, an event set to unfold within the very walls she now inhabited. The realization sent a shiver coursing down her spine, yet beneath the dread was a spark of fierce determination. If fate was penned by these rewriting books, then perhaps it could be rewritten. A sudden, soft voice broke the oppressive silence. "You should not linger here so long, Ilara. The deeper you delve, the darker the shadows become." Startled, Ilara turned to find Professor Alden Grey standing nearby, his gaunt frame silhouetted in the dim light. His silver hair shimmered like a halo, but his piercing blue eyes held a warning sharper than any blade. "The cipher you hold is more than a text," he continued, his tone low and gravelly. "It is a chain binding you to a destiny you might not escape without great cost." Ilara met his gaze steadily, the years of guarded wisdom in his eyes only fueling her resolve. "Then I will pay any cost. I refuse to be a passive character in this story. I will rewrite the ending." Professor Gray's expression softened briefly, a flicker of hope mingling with caution. Very well. But be warned, those who seek to change their fate often awaken forces far beyond their control. Before Alara could respond, the door burst open, and Mina Solis entered, breathless and wide-eyed. Clutched in her hands was a stack of encrypted notes she had uncovered in the digital archives. Alara, I think I found some clues hidden beneath layers of code that the cult didn't expect anyone to crack. This could be the key to rewriting the final act. A surge of gratitude and renewed hope filled Alara's chest. Show me, she urged, motioning to the scattered papers on the table. As they pored over the notes, the oppressive atmosphere was briefly lifted by their shared determination. Yet the threat lurking in the shadows remained palpable. From the depths of the stacks emerged a figure cloaked in darkness, Librarian Marlowe. His ivory mask caught the candlelight, gleaming ominously as he silently watched them, a living emblem of the Ivory cult's pervasive vigilance. Ilara's heart hammered against her ribs. The cult's presence was a constant reminder that her quest was not only intellectual but a dangerous battle for survival. Every step she took to alter the narrative risked provoking their wrath. Drawing a deep breath, Alara closed the ancient tome and met her friend's eyes. The cipher's final message is a warning and a challenge. It tells of conditions I must fulfill to survive the breaking of a cycle forged in shadows. We have little time, and the stakes have never been higher. Mina nodded fiercely. Then we fight not just for you, but for everyone trapped in this twisted story. Professor Gray stepped forward, placing a steadying hand on Alara's shoulder. Together, then, but beware, the final pages may demand sacrifices none of us can foresee. Outside, the library seemed to hold its breath, the books on the shelves whispering secrets as if aware that the climax was near. Alara felt the weight of history and destiny pressing down on her, but also the fragile hope that knowledge and courage might yet bend the course of fate. She opened the tome once more, ready to face the final cipher and the dark future it foretold. The last page awaited, its story unwritten, and Alara was determined to be the author of her own survival. The candle flickered violently, shadows stretched and twisted, and the library's ancient heart beat faster. Time was running out. As she prepared to turn the page, a distant echo of footsteps whispered through the stacks, heralding the inevitable confrontation. The final act had begun, and Alara stood at the precipice of destiny, poised between death and the hope of rewriting her fate. Alara Whitlock stood rooted in the heart of the restricted wing, the air around her heavy with the scent of ancient leather and ink. Before her lay the manuscript she had long sought, the cryptic text that contained the key to unraveling the Ivory cult's grip on the rewriting books. Her fingers trembled slightly as they brushed the brittle page, the faded symbols pulsing faintly beneath her touch, as if alive. All around, the library seemed to breathe. The walls whispered, the shadows lengthened and retracted like restless spirits, and the very pages of the books trembled on their shelves. Alara's breath caught. This was no ordinary library. It was a nexus of time and narrative, a place where stories danced on the edge of reality. Are you ready? Mina Solis's voice broke through the silence, steady and reassuring. She emerged from the shadows, carrying a small portable scanner and a laptop, the glow of the screen illuminating her determined face. We've calibrated the rewriting key. If this works, it could finally disrupt the cycle. Alara nodded, swallowing the knot of fear tightening in her chest. We don't have a choice. If I don't act now, the final crime, the one that ends me, will come true. Mina moved quickly, setting up the equipment on a nearby table, cluttered with scrolls and tomes. Her fingers flew over the keys, pulling up coded scripts and aligning them with the cipher Ilara had painstakingly decoded. The low hum of the laptop filled the space, a modern pulse in the midst of ancient decay. Professor Alden Gray appeared silently at the entrance to the wing, his tall, gaunt frame casting an imposing shadow. His piercing blue eyes fixed on Ilara with a mixture of caution and something deep regret, perhaps. Tampering with the narrative is a dangerous game, he warned, his voice a gravelly whisper. The Ivory cult has bound the threads of fate tightly. One wrong move, and the entire fabric could unravel beyond repair. Ilara met his gaze steadily. I understand the risk, but I can't live as a pawn to their story. I have to try. Gray sighed, a flicker of something like hope passing through his eyes. Then you'll need more than courage. You'll need the strength to face what comes after. The librarian Marlowe appeared from the shadows, silent as a spectre. His sharp features were unreadable, his allegiance uncertain. He watched the ritual with a guarded expression, neither intervening nor offering aid. With a deep breath, Ilara placed the rewriting key against the ancient manuscript. The ink shimmered, the symbols shifting and rearranging before her eyes. The library seemed to pulse in response, the very air thickening as the spell of predestination began to crack. Words twisted and danced across the pages in a chaotic ballet, the boundaries of time and story blurring. Ilara felt herself caught in the storm, the dizzying rush of history rewriting itself around her. Visions flickered her own death, the cult's shadowy figures, the faces of friends and foes intertwining in an endless narrative loop. Mina reached out, steadying Ilara's trembling hands. Hold on, we're disrupting their control. The chaos intensified, the library groaning under the strain. Books rattled on shelves, pages flying open and closed with frantic urgency. Yet, amidst the turmoil, Ilara's resolve crystallized. This was her story to write. As the last symbols settled into a new pattern, a fragile silence fell. The rewriting ceased. The library held its breath, but the victory was tentative. The cycle was broken, yet the consequences rippled outward in unpredictable waves. The Ivory cult's hold had weakened, but shadows lingered. Ilara exchanged a glance with Mina and Gray, her heart pounding with exhausted hope. We've bought time, she whispered, but the story isn't finished yet. Ilara Whitlock stepped cautiously into the gloom, the faint glow of phosphorescent script illuminating her path. The air was thick with the scent of aged parchment and something indefinably arcane, a mingling of dust and power that made her skin prickle. Ivory masks hovered silently in the shadows, suspended as if by magic, their blank faces gleaming faintly in the pale light. Each mask bore a different expression, serene, wrathful, inscrutable. They were the cult's silent sentinels, the haunting symbols of the Ivory cult's dominion over the library's rewriting books. Ilara's heart hammered as she realized she had reached the very heart of the labyrinth. From the darkness, figures emerged, cloaked and masked, their movements deliberate and measured. The leader stepped forward, a tall figure whose ivory mask reflected the flickering light like a mirror. His voice was a cold whisper that seemed to ripple through the air, echoing against the stone walls. You tread dangerous ground, Ilara Whitlock. The story is not yours to change. Ilara squared her shoulders, clutching the ancient tome that contained the cipher. Stories belong to those who tell them, she replied quietly, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions within. And I refuse to be a footnote in your predetermined script. The chamber seemed to respond to her defiance. Words, lifted from the pages of countless books, swirled around them. inked letters twisting into shapes before dissolving into the air. The very fabric of the library trembled, as if reality itself was caught in the tension between fate and free will. Professor Alden Gray appeared beside her, his silver hair catching the spectral light. His eyes, sharp and piercing, met hers with a rare flicker of encouragement. "Remember, Elara," he murmured, "the power of a story lies not only in its telling, but in the belief it inspires." The cult's leader advanced, reciting passages from the rewriting books in a voice that wove spells as much as sentences. "The future is written, the cycle unbroken. Resistance is but a shadow in the grand design." But Elara was no longer the uncertain student who stumbled upon a cryptic cipher. Her mind raced, connecting fragments of history, philosophy, and code. She countered with riddles and paradoxes, challenging the cult's dogma. Each exchange was a battle of intellect and will, their words shaping the shifting narrative that surrounded them. Suddenly, the tome in Elara's hands seemed to pulse with a life of its own. The cipher's lines glowed, revealing a hidden message, a way to rewrite the final crime, to disrupt the deterministic cycle. With trembling fingers, she began to inscribe the new narrative, her heart pounding as the chamber shook violently. Books flung open, pages fluttering wildly as if caught in a storm of unseen winds. The ivory masks quivered on their invisible strings, their expressions flickering between rage and fear. The rewriting books fought back, but Elara's defiant script carved a new path through the labyrinth of fate. As the chaos reached a crescendo, Elara felt herself suspended between worlds. The boundary between past and future, reality and story dissolving. The chamber seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the outcome of this desperate gambit. When the storm finally settled, silence fell like a fragile veil. The ivory masks hung motionless, their power diminished but not destroyed. The books ceased their frenzied rewriting, the texts stabilizing into a new, uncertain order. Elara gasped, the weight of what she had done settling over her. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. Somewhere beyond the chamber's walls, the library awaited the next chapter, and her own story written, but still unfolding. "This is not the end," Professor Gray said quietly, standing beside her. "But perhaps, for the first time, it is a beginning shaped by choice." Elara nodded, a fragile hope kindling in her chest. The battle of wits had changed the narrative, but the true journey to shape her own destiny had only just begun. With a determined breath, she stepped from the chamber, ready to face whatever the next page might hold. Elara Whitlock stood at the center of it all, her breath shallow, eyes wide behind the round glasses that slid slightly down her nose as the pages of the books around her fluttered violently, glowing faintly with ethereal light. Words dissolved and reformed mid-air, sentences twisting into riddles she had never seen before. The very fabric of the library's existence was unraveling, and Elara felt the crushing weight of responsibility pressing down on her shoulders. "It's happening faster than I expected," Mina's voice crackled through the comlink strapped to Elara's ear. "The digital archives are spinning out of control. I'm seeing corrupted texts, scrambled codesits like the whole system is fighting back." In the dim glow of the ancient lamps, Elara's gaze darted toward the far wall where stacks of books swayed unnaturally, their spines bending like living creatures. She tightened her grip on the cipher-laden tome she had been rewriting, the ink still wet and shimmering faintly with an otherworldly sheen. Each alteration she made seemed to ripple through the library itself, an unpredictable cause and effect that frightened and fascinated her in equal measure. We have to stop it, Alara whispered to herself, voice barely audible over the low hum of the library's unnatural transformation. If this chaos continues, the library's reality could collapse entirely. A sudden crash echoed from the western wing, where a towering bookshelf buckled under the strain of the shifting narrative. Dust motes danced in the swirling light as a cascade of books tumbled toward the floor. Alara pivoted sharply, heart pounding, only to see Librarian Marlowe step forward with an unflinching calm. His ivory mask caught the faint glow, reflecting a pale, ghostly light as he reached out to steady the collapsing shelf with surprising strength. "Marlowe," Alara called out, her voice sharp with urgency. "We don't have much time. The rewriting is spiraling out of control." He inclined his head slightly, the expression behind the mask unreadable. "The library resists change, Miss Whitlock, but it is not impervious." Before she could respond, a new wave of distorted pages erupted from the shelves, swirling around them like a storm of fragmented stories. Alara felt the words brush against her skin, each syllable a whisper from 1,000 voices past and future. The library was alive, a living narrative that both embraced and resisted her interference. From the shadows, Professor Alden Gray emerged, his gaunt frame framed against the undulating walls that seemed to ripple like liquid ink. His piercing blue eyes locked onto Ilara's, a mixture of warning and reluctant admiration simmering beneath his calm exterior. "You tread a dangerous path," he said gravely. "To rewrite fate is to invite chaos. But perhaps chaos is the only way to break the cycle." Alara swallowed hard, the weight of his words settling deep within her. "I have to try," she replied. "If I don't, the last crime the cipher predicted, my own death, will come true." Gray nodded slowly, stepping closer. "Then we must face the unraveling together." Mina's voice crackled again, this time with a note of triumph. "I've found a way to stabilize some of the digital archives, but it's a temporary fix. We need to disrupt the source, the rewriting mechanism itself." Alara nodded, determination hardening her features. "The hidden chamber, the artifacts, that's where the cult's power lies. If we can sever their control there, maybe we can anchor the narrative before it slips entirely through our fingers." As they moved through the convulsing halls, the library seemed to resist at every turn. Walls shifted imperceptibly, staircases led to corridors that vanished when approached, and whispers of forgotten stories echoed just beyond comprehension. Ilara's mind raced to piece together the cipher's final message, to find the words that could rewrite not just a prophecy, but the very nature of the library's existence. At one point, a sudden gust scattered a swarm of glowing pages around them, each fragment a twisted sentence or broken line. Alara reached out, catching a page that shimmered with a phrase in delicate script. "The narrative is unbound. The teller must choose." Her heart pounded. The choice was hers. In the chamber's shadowed heart, they confronted the ivory masked symbols of the cult's enduring influence. The air thickened with the weight of centuries of control and obsession. Ilara's fingers trembled as she placed the rewritten cipher on the altar-like pedestal, the ink still alive with the glow of possibility. "This is it," she breathed. The final page. A pulse of energy rippled through the room, the rewriting books around them convulsing in a crescendo of chaotic light. The library teetered on the edge of collapse, stories and histories fracturing and converging in a dizzying dance. "Now," Alara whispered, eyes fixed on the glowing text, "we break the cycle." As she began to read aloud the altered cipher, the walls around them quivered, the words in the books aligning in a fragile harmony. The narrative, once unbound and wild, started to coalesce, tethered by Ilara's will and the combined resolve of her allies. Yet, even as order returned, a lingering uncertainty hung in the air. The library had been changed forever, and so had she. The final question loomed. Could she truly control a story so vast and ancient? Or had she only delayed the inevitable unraveling? The answer was unwritten. But Ilara Whitlock was no longer bound to be a mere character in the tale. She was the author of her fate, wielding the pen with trembling hands and a resolute heart. And the last page had yet to be written. Its edges were worn, the stitching frayed, but the embossed initial ZW gleamed faintly beneath the dim glow of her flashlight. Her fingers trembled slightly as she traced the faded letters, a sudden, unspoken connection binding her to the past she had so long sought to understand. Each page whispered secrets in the soft crackle of brittle parchment. The handwriting, elegant yet hurried, belonged unmistakably to her mother. As Ilara read, the dense silence of the room was punctuated only by the distant rustle of shifting books and the occasional drip of water from the ancient stone walls. Her mother's words unfolded a tapestry of hidden truths. The Ivory cult was not merely an external menace, but a shadow entwined with her very bloodline. The diary recounted clandestine meetings beneath the vaulted arches of the university, where her parent scholars and secret resistors had gathered to challenge the cult's deterministic grip on history. They spoke of narrative control as both weapon and prison, their voices hushed with the weight of forbidden knowledge. Ilara's heart pounded as she absorbed the sacrifices made to protect her, including the painful choice that led to their disappearance. In the quiet study room that evening, Ilara read aloud passages that revealed the cult's origins entwined with myth and scholarly obsession. Her voice wavered with reverence, the shadows of her parents' fight casting long echoes across the walls. Professor Alden Gray, seated nearby, listened with an inscrutable expression, his piercing blue eyes reflecting both sorrow and a cautious hope. They were more than victims, Ilara whispered. They were part of the resistance, trying to rewrite the story before it could be sealed. Professor Gray nodded slowly. Their courage is why you are here now. But the fight is far from over. Memories flooded back vivid flashes of her childhood, the veiled warnings, the subtle tension in her relatives' eyes. The ivory mask that once sat on her father's desk now seemed a symbol of both menace and protection. As the rain pattered against the stained glass windows, Ilara felt the turbulent mix of grief and determination swell within her. She rose, moving to the window, watching the storm ripple across the campus. The past, with all its shadows and secrets, had finally become a beacon. Her parents' legacy was no longer a burden but a call to arms. To break the cycle, to reclaim the narrative, she must embrace the full weight of her heritage. The library around her seemed to pulse with renewed life, the rewriting texts momentarily still as if awaiting her next move. Ilara's gaze hardened with resolve. The final chapter was yet to be written, and she would be its author. As the storm raged outside, inside the library, a fragile hope took root, one that would either shatter the cult's hold forever or consume her in the unforgiving tide of fate. With a deep breath, Ilara closed the diary and turned toward the labyrinthine shelves, ready to face whatever shadows lurked ahead. The echoes of the past had spoken. Now it was time to shape the future. As Ilara Whitlock stood in the heart of the ancient building, she was surrounded by the trembling skeleton of knowledge itself. Shelves groaned under the weight of centuries, their foundations quivering. Dust motes swirling in the faint shafts of waning sunlight that filtered through stained glass windows, clouded by neglect. The very air seemed charged, thick with the echo of countless rewritten stories, desperate to be heard. Alara's breath caught a sharp intake that echoed against the stone walls. Around her,